Thomas Harrington walked into the courtroom with his black robe flowing behind him. He sat in his big chair and looked at the papers on his desk. Today was like any other day for him. After 20 years as a judge in Millbrook County, he knew how to run his courtroom well. Everything always went by the clock, quick and neat. His clerk handed him the next case file. Number 47, the clerk called out. A woman walked to the front of the room. She wore clean but old clothes. Her hair was neatly pulled back, and she stood straight and tall. Eleanor Bennett, Thomas read from the paper. You are here for having an expired car registration and a broken taillight. Do you understand these charges? Yes, Your Honor, she said in a clear, calm voice. Thomas barely looked at her. He had seen hundreds of people just like her. How do you plead? Guilty, Your Honor, but I would like to explain if I may. Thomas tried not to sigh out loud. Everyone always had a story. Go ahead, but keep it brief. Eleanor took a deep breath. I'm a single mother with 2 children, Your Honor. I work as a cleaner during the day and at a shop in the evenings. I had saved money for the car registration, but then my son James fell and broke his tooth. The dentist cost all the money I had saved. She paused. As for the taillight, I bought the part, but I haven't had time to fix it yet. It's in my car right now. Thomas looked at her record. No tickets before this one. Still, rules were rules. People always had excuses. Ms. Bennett, I understand life can be hard, but the law applies to everyone the same way. The court finds you guilty and orders you to pay a fine of £450 within 30 days. Eleanor's shoulders dropped a little, but her face stayed calm. Yes, Your Honor. You may go, Thomas said, already looking at the next file. Next case. That night, Thomas drove home to his big house in the nice part of town. He had a good dinner and watched some TV. He didn't think about Eleanor Bennett or how much £450 might mean to her. 3 days later, Thomas put on his best suit for the county budget meeting. As the head of the judges' committee, he had to attend these boring meetings every few months. He walked into the county building, shaking hands with the other important people he knew. The county manager stood up to start the meeting. Before we begin, I want to introduce our newest member. Many of you already know Dr. Eleanor Bennett, our newly elected county commissioner for District 5. Dr. Bennett also runs the community health program at Millbrook Hospital and teaches part-time at our community college. Thomas looked up, shocked. There at the big table, wearing a nice blue suit, was the same woman he had found in his courtroom. But now she looked different, confident, important, respected. Dr. Bennett looked right at him. A small smile crossed her face as their eyes met. Thank you, she said to the manager. I believe Judge Harrington and I have already met, actually. Everyone turned to look at Thomas. His face felt hot as he tried to smile. Yes, we have. The meeting went on, but Thomas couldn't focus. He kept looking at Dr. Bennett as she asked smart questions and made good points about helping poorer parts of the county. How had he missed who she really was? When they took a break for coffee, Thomas walked over to where Dr. Bennett stood. Commissioner Bennett, I didn't know who you were when you were in my courtroom, he said, feeling uncomfortable. She smiled gently. I wouldn't expect you to know, Judge. When I'm not at meetings like this, I'm just another person trying to get by in Millbrook County. But as a commissioner, surely you could have. What? Asked for special treatment, she asked. The people who voted for me trust me to understand their lives. I drive my old car to remember where I came from. That £450 fine you gave me? That's a month of food for families in my district. Thomas didn't know what to say. For the first time in years, he wondered if he had been looking at things all wrong. Thomas felt something strange in his chest as he stood there with Dr. Bennett. It wasn't just shame. It was something deeper, like seeing a door open to a room he never knew existed. Would you have time for coffee after this meeting? He asked suddenly. I'd like to hear more about your district. Dr. Bennett looked surprised but nodded. I would appreciate that, Judge Harrington. 2 hours later, they sat in a small cafe near the courthouse. It wasn't fancy, but the coffee was good. Thomas noticed Dr. Bennett knew the woman behind the counter by name. Mary's son goes to the same school as my boy, Dr. Bennett explained when she caught him watching. She works 3 jobs to keep them in a safe flat. Thomas stirred his coffee slowly. The east side of town, I don't get there much. Most people from your neighborhood don't, she said simply. There was no blame in her voice, just fact. How did you become a commissioner? And a doctor? Thomas asked. Dr. Bennett smiled. My grandmother cleaned houses for 40 years so my mother could finish school. My mother worked 2 jobs so I could go to university. I was the first in my family to get a degree. She paused. But I was lucky. I had help. Many don't. Thomas thought about the people who came through his courtroom every day. He never asked about their stories. He just applied the law. That day in court, he began, you could have told me who you were. And what would that have proven? That there are 2 systems, one for people with titles and one for everyone else? She shook her head. I wanted to be treated like any other person in your courtroom. And I was. Her words stung, but Thomas knew she was right. What happens to people who can't pay the fines I give them? He asked. Dr. Bennett's face became serious. They borrow money at high interest. They skip paying bills. They miss work to come to court again. Some lose their jobs because of it. Some lose their homes. Thomas felt sick. Had his courtroom been causing all this? Tomorrow is my community day, Dr. Bennett said. I visit people in my district. Would you like to come along? See things from a different view? The next morning, Thomas didn't wear his usual suit. He put on jeans and a simple shirt and met Dr. Bennett at the community center in the East District. Their first stop was a small apartment building. The lift was broken, so they walked up 4 flights of stairs. Dr. Bennett knocked on a door, and an older woman opened it. Dr. Bennett. What a nice surprise, the woman said with a warm smile. Mrs. Clark, this is my friend Thomas. We're just checking in on how you're doing after your surgery. Mrs. Clark invited them in. The apartment was tiny but very clean. Pictures of children and grandchildren covered the walls. The new hip is better, Mrs. Clark said, but those stairs are still hard. And the medicine costs more than my pension gives me. Thomas listened as they talked about programs that might help, about her grandchildren, about the neighborhood. When they left, Mrs. Clark hugged them both. Throughout the day, they visited 10 more homes. Thomas met a young father who worked nights and watched his children during the day while his wife worked. He met a college student who couldn't afford books. He met elderly people who had to choose between food and medicine. At their last stop, Thomas froze when the door opened. It was a young man he had sentenced to community service last month for a minor offense. Judge Harrington, the young man said in shock. Hello, Kevin, Thomas said, feeling awkward. Dr. Bennett smiled. Kevin just finished the computer class at the community center. He's helping set up our new website. Kevin nodded, still looking confused. Yes. Dr. Bennett has been really helpful. As they walked back toward the community center, Thomas was quiet. What are you thinking, Judge? Dr. Bennett finally asked. I'm thinking about how little I know about the people I judge every day, he answered honestly. Kevin is talented. I just saw him as a case number. It's easy to see categories instead of people, Dr. Bennett said gently. The question is, what will you do now that you've seen more? Thomas looked around at the neighborhood, at the people trying their best with what they had. For the first time in many years, he felt something changing inside him. I need to learn more, he said. And then I need to do better. The next morning, Thomas sat in his office early before court began. The walls were covered with law books and certificates, but now they felt like they belonged to someone else. He pulled out a stack of case files from the past month and began to read them again, this time trying to see the people behind the papers. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. It was his clerk, Robert. "Judge, court starts in 20 minutes, Robert said, looking surprised to see the judge already working. "Robert, how long have you worked with me?" Thomas asked. "Almost 8 years, sir. And in that time, have I ever asked about what happens to people after they leave my courtroom?" Robert looked uncomfortable. "Not that I recall, sir." Thomas nodded slowly. "I'd like to start. Can you help me gather some information?" When court began that day, people noticed something different about Judge Harrington. He looked people in the eye. He asked questions. He listened more than he spoke. The last case of the morning was a young woman named Lucy White, charged with driving without insurance. "Miss White, do you understand the charges?" Thomas asked. "Yes, Your Honor," she said quietly. She looked very young and very scared. "And how do you plead?" "Guilty, Your Honor." Thomas looked at her file. She was 19, working part-time while studying nursing. "Miss White, can you tell me why you were driving without insurance?" The girl looked surprised at the question. I had insurance, sir. But I missed a payment when I had to buy books for school. They canceled it. I was driving to pay it when I got pulled over." The old Thomas would have given her the standard fine without thinking twice. But now he paused. "Ms. White, the law exists to protect everyone on the road. Insurance is important." He saw her shoulders drop. "However, I'm going to offer you an alternative. Instead of a fine, you can complete 10 hours at our new driver safety program. If you complete it within 30 days and show proof of current insurance, this will be removed from your record." The relief on Lucy's face was clear. "Thank you, Your Honor. I will." After court, Thomas called Dr. Bennett. "I need your help," he said when she answered. "I want to learn more about alternative sentencing programs in other counties." Dr. Bennett sounded pleased. "I know several we could look at." "What brought this on?" "I'm starting to see that standard fines aren't always fair or effective. They hit some people much harder than others." For the next few weeks, Thomas spent his evenings researching. He learned about community service programs, sliding scale fines based on income, payment plans, and education alternatives. He visited courts in other counties to see their programs in action. One evening, he sat in on a community meeting in Dr. Bennett's district. People were talking about problems with the courts. A woman stood up to speak. "I got a £300 fine for a parking ticket. That was half my month's pay," she said sadly. "I had to borrow money from a loan shop with high interest. Now I owe even more, and I might lose my flat." Thomas felt his face grow hot with shame. This was the result of how he had been running his courtroom. After the meeting, a man approached Thomas. It took him a moment to recognize Kevin, the young man he had sentenced before. "Judge Harrington," Kevin said. "Dr. Bennett told me what you're trying to do. I wanted to tell you that the community service you gave me, it actually helped. I met people at the community center who helped me get computer training. Now I have a part-time job." Thomas was surprised. "I'm glad to hear that, Kevin." "The thing is," Kevin continued, "most people see a punishment as just something to get through. But it could be something that actually helps people do better." That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what Kevin had said. What if the court could be a place that helped people instead of just punishing them? The next morning, he called the chief judge of the county. "William, I'd like to propose a new program for our courts," Thomas said when the chief judge answered. "This sounds serious, Thomas. You've never been one for new programs before." "I know. But I've been learning some things. Can I meet with you tomorrow to discuss it?" After he hung up, Thomas looked at the proposal he had been working on. He had titled it the Millbrook County Fair Justice Initiative. It outlined plans for income-based fines, community service options, education programs, and payment plans without interest. For the first time in years, Thomas felt excited about his work. He was starting to see how justice could be about making things better, not just punishing wrongs. The meeting with Chief Judge William Green went better than Thomas had expected. At first, William had looked at him with confusion. "This doesn't sound like you, Thomas," William had said, looking over the proposal. "You've always been our strictest judge. By the book, no exceptions." Thomas had nodded. "I know. But I was wrong, William. I was looking at laws but not at people. Not at what happens after they leave our courtroom." To Thomas's surprise, William had agreed to present the proposal to the full judges committee. Now, 2 weeks later, Thomas stood before his fellow judges, feeling more nervous than he had in years. "The data is clear," Thomas said, pointing to charts on the screen behind him. "Our current system of standard fines hurts poor people much more than others. A £200 fine might be nothing to some people in our county, but it can mean no food for a week for others." Judge Mary Porter raised her hand. "But Thomas, the law should treat everyone equally." "Equal treatment isn't always fair treatment," Thomas replied. "If two people commit the same offense but one earns £50,000 a year and another earns £15,000, the same fine isn't an equal burden." The meeting went on for 2 hours. Some judges supported the idea right away. Others had concerns. Thomas answered each question patiently, using what he had learned from Dr. Bennett and his own research. Finally, William called for a vote. 8 judges voted yes, 3 voted no, and 2 wanted more time to think about it. "Congratulations, Thomas," William said after the meeting. "We'll start with a 6-month test of your Fair Justice Initiative. You'll lead it, of course." Thomas felt both excited and scared. "Thank you. I'll need help, though. I think I know someone who might be interested," William smiled. "Your new friend from the county commission, Dr. Bennett?" The next day, Thomas invited Dr. Bennett to lunch to tell her the news. "They approved it?" she asked, her eyes lighting up. "A 6-month test," Thomas nodded. "But it's a start. We'll need community partners, though. People who can help with the education programs, job training, that sort of thing." Dr. Bennett smiled. "I think I can help with that." Over the next month, Thomas worked harder than he had in years. He met with community groups, social workers, and other judges to set up the new program. He created new forms that would help determine fair fines based on income. He found local businesses willing to offer community service positions. The hardest part was training his own staff. Some, like Robert, quickly understood and supported the changes. Others were more resistant. "This is too much work," complained one clerk. "It was easier when we just gave everyone the same fine." "Easier for us," Thomas agreed. "But not better for the community we serve." Finally, the day came to launch the program. Thomas felt nervous as he put on his robes that morning. What if it didn't work? What if he was making things worse? His first case that day was a middle-aged man named William Taylor, charged with driving 5 miles over the speed limit. "Mr. Taylor, do you understand the charge against you?" Thomas asked. "Yes, Your Honor," the man replied. "And how do you plead?" "Guilty, Your Honor. I was in a hurry to get my daughter to her doctor's appointment." Thomas nodded. "Under our new program, Mr. Taylor, you have options for how to resolve this matter. The standard fine would be £100. However, based on the income information you provided, we can adjust that to £65, or you can complete 4 hours of community service instead." Mr. Taylor looked surprised. "I could do community service? I'm good with fixing things. I work as a handyman." "Yes," Thomas said. "We have several options, including helping at the community center's maintenance program." "I'd like to do that," Mr. Taylor said. "It would be better for me than paying the fine right now." As the day went on, Thomas saw a difference in his courtroom. People seemed less afraid, more willing to talk, more honest about their situations. And Thomas felt different too. For the first time in years, he felt like he was truly helping people. That evening, Thomas received a text from Dr. Bennett. "How did the first day go?" He typed back, "Better than I expected." People seemed relieved to have options. Her reply came quickly, "That's what happens when the system sees people as humans first, offenders second." Thomas smiled at her message. 6 months ago, he wouldn't have understood what she meant. Now it seemed like the most obvious truth in the world. As he drove home, Thomas passed through Dr. Bennett's district. He saw people sitting on porches, children playing in small parks, workers coming home tired from long days. For the first time, he didn't see strangers. He saw neighbors. 6 months passed quickly. Thomas had worked harder than ever before, often staying late at the courthouse to review cases and make adjustments to the Fair Justice Initiative. Today was the day he would present the results to the county board. Thomas straightened his tie as he waited outside the meeting room. Dr. Bennett walked up and stood beside him. "Nervous?" she asked with a small smile. "A bit," Thomas admitted. "Everything we've worked for comes down to these numbers." "Not just numbers," Dr. Bennett reminded him. "People's lives." They walked into the room together. All 15 county board members sat around the large table, including the 3 who had openly opposed the program from the start. Chief Judge William was there too, sitting near the front. Thomas took a deep breath and began his presentation. 6 months ago, we started the Fair Justice Initiative with a simple idea: that true justice should help people do better, not just punish them for doing wrong. He clicked to show his first chart. In these 6 months, we've handled 846 cases under the new program. He went through the data carefully. Payment rates for fines had increased from 67% to 89%. Repeat offenses had dropped by 28%. Community service hours had added up to over 4,000 hours of work that helped the county. But the numbers don't tell the whole story, Thomas said. Let me share a few examples of what's really happened. He told them about Lisa, a single mother who had chosen community service instead of a fine she couldn't afford. During her service at a local food bank, she learned about a job opening there and was now working full-time with benefits. He told them about George, an older man who had been caught driving with an expired license because he couldn't afford to renew it. The court had connected him with a senior services program that helped him get his license renewed and find affordable transportation options. And then there's Kevin, Thomas said, showing a picture of the young man he had sentenced before the program began. Kevin completed his community service at our tech center, discovered he had a talent for computers, and is now working part-time there while finishing his degree. Thomas looked around the room. Some board members were nodding. Others still looked skeptical. I know some of you worried this program would be too soft on crime or cost too much money, Thomas said. But the data shows we've actually saved the county money while helping people break cycles of debt and court appearances. One of the opposing board members, Richard Brown, raised his hand. This all sounds good, Judge Harrington, but what about deterrence? Don't people need to feel some pain to learn their lesson? Thomas nodded. A fair question, Mr. Brown. But our data shows that meaningful consequences actually work better than harsh ones. People who feel the system is fair are more likely to respect it. Those who feel trapped by it often give up trying. The questions continued for nearly an hour. Thomas answered each one honestly, sometimes turning to Dr. Bennett when a question touched on community issues. Finally, William called for a vote on whether to make the program permanent. Those in favor, he asked. 12 hands went up, including Richard Brown's. Those opposed? Only 2 hands rose. Abstentions? 1 hand. The motion passes, William announced. The Fair Justice Initiative will become a permanent program of Millbrook County Courts. Thomas felt a wave of relief wash over him. Dr. Bennett squeezed his arm gently. Outside after the meeting, several board members congratulated Thomas. As they walked away, Dr. Bennett turned to him. You know what the best part of this is? She asked. What's that? You changed. And because you changed, the system is changing. Thomas nodded slowly. I keep thinking about that day in court when I find you. If you hadn't been who you are, if you had been just another person who couldn't afford to pay, I would never have known the harm I was causing. Sometimes we need to see ourselves through someone else's eyes, Dr. Bennett said. A week later, Thomas sat in his courtroom, looking at a young woman who reminded him a bit of Eleanor Bennett from that day months ago. She had been caught driving with an expired registration. Miss Parker, under our program, you have several options, Thomas explained kindly. Based on your income, the fine would be £75, or you could complete 8 hours of community service. We also have a payment plan available if you need it. The woman looked relieved. The community service would be better for me, Your Honor. I'm between jobs right now. There's a position helping at the library's children's program. Would that interest you? Yes, sir. I love reading to kids. As she left his courtroom, Thomas felt that now familiar feeling of doing something right. Not just following rules, but helping people find better paths forward. That evening, as Thomas drove home, he passed a car with a broken taillight. Instead of feeling annoyed as he once would have, he felt hopeful. Maybe the driver would end up in his courtroom. And maybe that would be the beginning of something better for them, just as it had been for him when Eleanor Bennett had walked into his court and changed everything.